Alright, so now we're finished creating a very basic menu that loads a specified game level. However, it still has some ways to go before it looks really polished. We can really go to town in Flash with all kinds of effects, and we can make this menu sit in 3D space in the game engine as well, rotating it on the Z-axis and so forth. Another important consideration which we'll focus on here is the level itself in which our menu resides. A level which is designed to be a container for user interface generally has pretty different requirements than one that's for gameplay. In an earlier part of the series, I mentioned that I wanted to show you what would happen if you didn't take all the typical steps in the Kismet portion of the map preparation in the UDK. When our simple menu was completed, we could see that a few things were indeed a little bit wacky. In general, we don't want a HUD or any other on-screen graphics such as a crosshair while our menu is showing. We also don't want the player spawn effect or sounds when the level loads, and we don't want the player or weapon to show on screen, and we don't want them to be able to move. What we probably do want are the menu options, menu sound effects, a background graphic, and maybe some background animations. So over the next videos we'll take you through some of these and of course more Scaleform specific stuff. One more consideration though for our menu, and this will be an important one, and that is the game type settings. The default game type for a map in Unreal Engine defines the allowed gameplay rules that will load with it. This could be one of the default modes like Deathmatch, or a custom game type that you've created with Unreal Script, or it could be one of the cinematic or menu classes. It's important to know what these do and how to get them to work. The surprising thing to me is that even many experienced Unreal developers don't know about this, but I'll explain to you what the trick is. In this single powerful setting, we can take care of a lot of the problems that I've outlined here and wipe them out in one fell swoop, but it's not an ideal solution for everybody, so I'll save that part for last. Again, let's open the Kismet editor and see what we can take care of from here. So click K, and let's get started. For this lesson, I'm going to go back to the original menu that I created, but you ought to be able to follow along just fine using the simple version. Now Kismet is a powerful thing for the designer. It's important to look at the options that you have in the actions, events, conditions, and variables. Think of them like an artist's palette, and we have many options available within that palette with which we can accomplish many things. If you familiarize yourself with them, you'll be able to be an effective problem solver. For example, if we don't want the HUD to show, which of the many bits and pieces in Kismet might help us with that? Or to put it another way, what parts of a game never typically show a heads-up display? I'll let you ponder on that one for a moment. Cinematics, perhaps? Alright, so how do you figure they set up cinematics? In code? Actually, primarily it's done through Matinee and Kismet. So that probably means there are some options in Kismet for cinematics, huh? Yeah, maybe. So under actions, we can see there's already one, but that's not what we want. If we're a little more thorough and persistent, we can find under toggle cinematic mode. Brilliant. Now let's put that between our OpenGFX movie and level loaded. Use Control to move it around. First, break the existing links to level loaded by right-clicking the black square, and break all links. And then we want to connect loaded and visible to toggle cinematic mode enable. And the out of toggle cinematic mode should go to the in of OpenGFX movie. And now let's do a level test. Nothing yet. Could that mean that we're doing something wrong? What if we were to click toggle cinematic mode and play around with some of the options? It's actually pretty good. We want to make sure that disable movement, disable turning, hide HUD, hide player are checked, and they are. But we don't want to disable input, so let's uncheck that. That would be kind of a bad thing for a menu system. Okay, so what else might we be missing at this point? Well, it's here that we need to remember that Unreal needs to know who an action needs to be applied to, or there won't be an action. You might remember we added a player variable in one of our previous lessons to get the map to open when we hit play. The one we have over here is set to all players, but in our simple version we had it set to player 0, so we don't need to create a new variable, we can just reuse this one anytime we need it. So to use it here, we're going to go to the toggle cinematic mode node, and the lovely pink colored target input, we'll just connect that to the player. So one more test. So that's looking a little better. We don't have the HUD anymore, but we still have the player weapon and spawn sound to address. Something else I'd like to show you, because I've already got my background cinematic loop created. We'll just connect that to our toggle cinematic modes outs. Now we'll test it again, and you'll see in a second that our player model still shows. You didn't hear, but we're still getting the spawn sound as well. Now I personally think that an option should be added to cinematic mode to disable spawn sounds. But at present we'll have to find another solution. And what about the issue of the player coming into the view? Why is that happening? Well, I'll show you. We have a cinematic camera set up here, and every time this camera moves back during the motion loop, it goes over the player's spawn. Thus, our character ends up being included in the cinematic. The fix for this problem is remarkably simple. Make your spawn point a good healthy distance from the field of view of your camera at any point in your cinematic. Just click it to bring up the manipulator and drag it. Now you can see that the camera no longer overlaps the player. There's still the issue of the unwanted spawn noise, and there's only one solution that I know of at least, where we won't have to resort to Unreal scripting. We have to change the map's game type and one other thing via world properties, which can be found in the view menu. Down at the bottom you'll see a pretty delicious sounding option, game type for pie. And I wish that meant blueberry pie, but it means play in editor. You'll also see one called game type supported. And we want these two to be the same. Now feel free to experiment with the options, but you'll probably come to the following conclusions when you do. Number one is that UDK game and UT entry game are the menu-related game types. These successfully get rid of the spawn sound. Or at least you'll think so at first, and that's the second thing you'll notice, that even with both options set correctly, it'll work in PyEditor, but in-game you'll still get spawn sounds. There's a workaround for this, and you might not like it. It's a bit of a hack, but it works. I'll explain that in a second, but the third thing that you'll notice is, if you use UT entry game as your game type, it'll kill all post-processing, and you're left with a very dull-looking game. So definitely use UDK game unless dull is what you're after. So that workaround I mentioned, well, the Unreal Development Kit currently ties the menu game types to maps containing the name UDK or UT frontend. And perhaps I'll pass this along to Epic and see if they're willing to open it up to other file names, but in the meantime you can either rename your map to something like UDK frontend _0 or _1, and that'll work fine. Or alternatively, you can rename the existing frontend, save yours with its original name, and then when you run UDK your menu will load, because its name will already be specified by the UDK engine.ini file. And that covers pretty much everything we need to do as far as cleanup to get our map prepared to be a container for a menu system. Now we can focus on taking the customization further. And we'll be doing just that coming up.